Firefighters of Reddit, what's the dumbest person you had to save in a stupid situation? Dumbest tried to cross a raging river in 0-degree weather about a 300-foot span on a Snowmobile. He lived but didn't make the crossing and the machine was recovered days later. In Maine you are required to get your Snowmobile out if you sink it in a lake. They don't want those things leaking and polluting. So every year you hear about some guy having to hire a diver and such. I once had a firefighter tell me he almost died in a house fire while going back into the house to look for the owner. A neighbor was concerned about why the firefighter was still in the residence, so he asked another firefighter. This is about how the exchange went. Neighbor, why is that fireman still in the house? Firefighter, has looking for the owner of the home. Neighbor, he is right over there with the video camera. Turns out the owner did not think it was important to alert the fire department he was out of the house. Instead, he was just taking video of the whole event. The fire started because the owner had tried to smother his barbecue cooker flame with leftover wood from the siding that had been installed on his home. The owner did not realize it would burn. Burned his whole house down. We needed to close the main connection through a forest over the winter because the trees were falling faster on the road than we could remove them due to way too much snow falling. Also the redirection was more than an hour longer due to the snow. Some cars thought that they would come through but turned around as soon as they saw the trees on the road. One semi also thought he'd get through. He drove up to the trees and called the fire brigade and complained why we didn't remove the trees. As he was calling, a bunch of trees behind him also fell, locking him in. It stood there 1 month before the trees and the snow could get removed by us, that at least the semi can back out. We needed another month until the road was free again. Former firefighter / EMT. Easily the dumbest person I encountered was a mother of 4 who decided it would be an awesome idea to get a Facebook / Instagram worthy picture of her kids all under age 10 sitting in a rowboat. Mother untied it from the dock and thought she'd just pull them back with a rope that she forgot to hold onto. They floated a half-mile down the river before the 2 oldest boys managed to grab a branch hanging over the bank. It was really surreal to see 4 young kids, all in matching clothing, sitting in a boat waiting to be rescued. I have no clue what happened after, but they were physically fine, just scared, a little tired, but the mom was in full-blown panic mode and kept getting in our way. I hope she's making better choices now. I was called to a home to get a pie out of the oven before it caught fire. The lady went to the store and was delayed for some reason. She didn't need to have the fire department take the pie out of the oven and place it on the stove. The call came in as something stuck in over and unable to turn off stove. Still #1 call in 32 years. Years ago we had this call straight out of Caddyshack. Some guy had gotten tired of this gopher ruining his yard. Little did he know though he was facing the Suntizedu of gophers. The homie owner, dwelling upon his experience from Vietnam, decided that the best way to deal with the gopher was to treat the situation like a VC tunnel. In lieu of a frag grenade he poured a 5-gallon can of gasoline down the gopher hole, waited with a varmint gun, and lit it off. The ensuing explosion caused a small crater to form in his yard. I'm still thoroughly impressed that there was a proper fuel to air ratio in the network of tunnels that allowed for such an explosion to happen. However, the gopher refused to surrender without a fight. The gopher ran out of the hole engulfed in flames, causing the guy's yard to catch on fire. The gopher sprinted into the guy's shed still on fire and burrowed into a void space in the wall where he died. Like the martyr perk from Modern Warfare, his still flaming remains set the inside of the wall on fire as well as several flammables. In the end the guy's backyard was ruined and about a quarter of his shed burned down, taking out a bunch of power tools and a 0-turn mower. He definitely would have saved a few $1,000s if he had hired an exterminator. I was a Navy corpsman, so this one is probably a bit of a reach, but whatevs. Marine comes to sick call with a seriously beaten up deck. Like, lacerations, bruising. Thing was really fricked up. Asked him what he did, and he insisted that what happened was that he had a surprise boner and it hit his zipped up pants zipper and basically went all garbage disposal on his junk. Dude would not drop this narrative, no matter how many times we told him that this just doesn't happen. Finally, Doc, the actual MD, comes in and tells him enough of this shoot, yada yada, write him up for malingering. Need the full story? Dude jammed his wiener into the back of a computer tower. According to him, there was an opening back there, probably because old PC towers in the Navy routinely had chute swapped out, and they didn't always cover openings when things were removed. So, because he was a freaking donkey, he stuck his finger in it and felt a light tingling sensation as his skin made contact with something electrical. So he took the next logical step and whipped out his deck and shoved it into the back of this computer. What he did not account for was that the opening had sharp metal edges. But once inside, he got that tingling feeling, and so he felt like he might as well finish his job before he pulled out. Plus, and this is where I had to stop myself from laughing, he felt it was smarter to pull himself out flaccid rather than hard. Taps forehead. This was not a young man. This was not a man without rank. Edit. I wear this gold and silver as badges of shame for the shoot I've SE. A motorist had a bad alternator and the car died while he was driving. The electric lock control stopped working. We were dispatched for a person trapped in a motor vehicle. On arrival, the advice was given to manually lift the lock knob. You can easily tell the ones who will not survive the first 24 hours of the zombie apocalypse. If completely forgotten about this until reading yours. Called to a lockout. Get to the location and am met with "we just need a jump start," and think, okay, wrong call. Get out the cables and ask them to pop the hood. Oh, we can't. We're locked out. Driver is holding keys in hand. Passenger window is down. I starting backing away assuming some kind of theft scam. They actually thought they were locked out because the key fob wasn't unlocking the door. It turns out the fob battery had died. Showed them how to use the key. After checking ID again, the registration retrieved though the open window. Vehicle battery was not dead. Firefighter / paramedic in suburb of PHX had to transport a guy to the ER because he was constipated. His wife tried to dig it out with a wooden spoon. Spoon got stuck and her to move it. Walked in and there's a 250-pound man, but naked, lying on his side with a huge wooden spoon stuck halfway up his butt. Me and my dad are both firefighters, and he said one time they went to a house because an elderly man could not get out of the leather recliner because he had been sitting in it for a week straight, and his wife would just serve him drinks / food and the guy never got up. He would just get drunk and urinate / defecate himself until he was physically stuck to the chair and they had to cut him out. Just asked this question of a firefighter friend. He saved a guy who was siphoning gas out of someone's car by sucking gas towards his mouth to start the siphon. The would-be thief was also smoking while doing it. Burns happened. Had a fellow who was running from the police. He decided to climb on board a chunk of ice that was flowing down the river. I'm sure he thought he was a genius at the time, but the issue is that there isn't really a whole lot north of our town for a few hundred miles, so his long-term planning wasn't great. Eventually we found him hiding in a small icy overhang on the side of the river suffering from hypothermia. After a brief stay in hospital he ended up being arrested. I was a volunteer firefighter many years back. One summer, after a long period of no rain, two good old boys decide to have a few dozen beers and take their Jeep into a nearby field to go off-roading. Well, 2 feet tall corn stalks that are bone dry wind up getting jammed up into the undercarriage, which, on a 90+ day, turns out to be hot enough to ignite a fire. The owner of the field sees the situation unfolding from their house and calls for fire and police. Given the proximity to my location, I go directly to the scene after hearing the page go out and see these two assholes trying to drive the Jeep faster and faster to put the fire out. Eventually, the engine gives out, but they won't leave the car. I physically had to reach in, burning my arms in the process, since I didn't respond to the station first to get my turnout gear and pull them out. Somehow, they decided that remaining in the car would slow down the flames. And because they thought it was a good idea to continue driving a burning vehicle around a dry field, we now have a significant brush fire and have to call mutual aid from another county to help douse the fire. State police get involved. I have a nice trip to the hospital, and assholes lose their Jeep and the remainder of their booze. Former fire and rescue firefighter here have helped release several dogs and children stuck in the mechanism part of a recliner chair. Also a bird stuck in a tree. Go figure. When I was in college, the campus security got a call on a hawk stuck in a tree. The caller said that they could see that the hawk had its talon stuck in the tree since it was using exaggerated movements trying to free one leg and then getting the other leg caught. Think of a toddler holding something sticky with one hand, then pulling it with the other hand to only get it stuck on the other hand. Security locate the hawk, and it is still making the exaggerated movements. One guy gets closer and then starts laughing. Turns out the hawk was making the exaggerated movements because it had killed something and was in the process of ripping the prey apart. I remember asking a firefighter about this once, and he said a guy who was freaking a woman. Her husband came home, so he jumped out the second story window buck naked and impaled himself through the upper leg on a fence paling. It was one of those flirty-less ones, so it fricked up his leg pretty badly. They had to cut the paling out of the fence and load him into an ambulance. Obligatory not a fireman, but they were most definitely involved. I used to work in a New York City public grammar school over the summers to pay for college back in the 90s. One of the full-time employees was a nice guy but stupid. And I don't mean he was slow or anything, he just did dumb shit because he was careless. One time he loaded up a trailer with like 25 gallons of gas and was driving it back through the main school parking lot. He didn't realize that container cracked open and spilled all 25 gallons in the parking lot. He didn't want to get in trouble, so he thought the best way to get rid of the evidence was to set the gas on fire. He didn't realize that burning gas gives off a lot of black smoke, and a gigantic cloud of black smoke coming from a school generally attracts a lot of attention from first responders. Panicking, he tries to put the flaming lake of gas out by driving over it with his car. The fire department gets there, screaming at him to stop driving his car through flaming gasoline. They finally get the fire out and just screamed at this guy for like 25 minutes. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. I was the dumb call. My cat got her paw stuck under the dishwasher and was screaming bloody murder. I couldn't move her paw and I couldn't lift the machine, so I sat with her while my husband called the fire department. She chewed right through one of my favorite blankets in her stress. Firefighters arrive, not in full suits, but heavy boots and pants. Soon as they came around the corner to the kitchen, our cat miraculously was able to free her paw and take off to hide in the bathroom. The guys seemed confused, but at least it was easy. We thanked them profusely for being scary enough to free our cat, who had zero physical damage, not even a broken claw. I guess she'd hooked her claws on something and didn't want to let it go for love or money. Not me, but dad was a firefighter in Nick and once responded to a call at a Chinese food restaurant where the owner's walkway was iced over. He apparently didn't speak very good English and maybe misunderstood the job of a fireman. Genuinely don't know. They salted down his front walkway for him and explained that this was 100% not their job. They all had a good laugh and the guy gave them all free egg rolls. PPL always used to ask him questions about crazy calls and he never enjoyed talking about that, so he would always tell that story. Happened in '99, still makes me laugh to this day 20 years later. Eater, if you plan on commenting something along the lines of 20 years ago, ZOMG, I'm old. Screw you for reminding me. I assure you roughly 40 other people have already beaten you to the punch. I get it, 99 doesn't feel that long ago, let's all move on lol. It's interesting that that's what so many people took away from this story. Heard this story from a friend. Emergency call comes in for a miscellaneous electrical hazard. Chief walks in and a woman tells him that the TV in the bedroom is making a weird noise. It's turned off but there's a low buzzing sound coming from the area. Chief unplugs the TV, which she didn't think to do, and the noise doesn't stop. The TV is sitting on top of a chest of drawers, so he opens up the top drawer and finds this woman's vibrator just buzzing away. Super awkward. Obligatory not a firefighter, but recently in San Diego a group of suburban moms decided to take their infants up the local hiking spot called Cowell's Mountain. It's not a particularly grueling hike as many children and elderly people can do it. However, there is a heat stroke warning posted at the trailhead. Not to mention it can get pretty hot here, and this last week was no exception with temperatures exceeding 90 degrees. Well, these idiots took their infants up in this heat. The trail is pretty exposed, and due to its easy accessibility and Instagram worthiness, lots of inexperienced hikers flock to it, many times with little to no water, because they underestimated how hot and difficult it could be. Needless to say, the fire department / EMS and chopper were all called as these moms had taken their babies up and were too tired and exhausted to come down. They had to go up and give water, check their conditions, and some even carried the babies down. I know fires are a lot hotter, but I bet they were cursing out these moms in their heads as they had to hike up the mountain in pretty much full gear. The moms came strolling down laughing and flipping off the cameras as they were angry people were going to see their stupidity. This happened all because they wanted to take a group photo with their infants on a mountain on a hot day. Edit. 2 kids and 2 infants. Fire department and the paramedics had to come to my work one day because some kid didn't know the difference between a swimming pool and a splash pad. There's this artificial waterfall that goes down into a basin that's only about 2 inches deep where there's fountains and stuff for kids to play in. This kid decided to climb up the waterfall. There are multiple signs posted not to do this, and decided to dive off into the water below that again is only 2 inches deep. Luckily the kid landed flat on his face, so he survived and avoided being paralyzed, but he was knocked out cold immediately and would have probably drowned. But luckily his mother heard the splat and came running over screaming and pulled him out. Not a firefighter. This happened to my son when he was 6. He was at a Cub Scout meeting which was next door to the fire station. The firefighters had these racks where they'd lay their hoses out to dry. I think the little scouts were climbing on those racks one day and my son's chubby leg slipped between the bars and got stuck. The firefighters had to come use the jaws of life on their own damn racks to free my kid. We've done public service calls at my department. We once went out on a call to look for some lady's old dog that had wandered into the woods in the winter. We have this really cool device, TIC or thermal imaging camera, that can detect even the slightest difference in heat, and we're able to follow the heat / footprints of the dog to find her. We are stationed in a small town and don't really have much else to do in the winter. Not a person and not me, but a really funny story. My dad was a firefighter in Los Angeles and was doing ember checks for a building fire that they just put out. A stray cat walks into the building like nothing happened. So my dad, being the joker he is, sees the cat and sees the news crew standing outside the building. So he quickly picks up the cat, throws a little soot on it, and runs out the building like he just saved it in front of all of the world to see. Not a firefighter, but EMT. Also my friend's story. Dude was spending some alone time and wanted to stimulate himself. I guess he didn't have a traditional dialed, so he used the handle end of a whisk. The problem was that the whisk had a ball on the very end of it. Handle was a normal cylinder tube with a ball on the very end. Went in just fine, but he couldn't pull it out himself. Apparently when they got the call he didn't tell them what was going on, just that he had got something stuck. They got there to see a whisk hanging out his butt. Apparently the whole thing just made everyone laugh, but the poor dude was freaking out and in pain from trying to pull it out. He also apparently tried to give it a few good tugs, which probably didn't help. Took him to the hospital, where they gave him relaxer and lubed him up.